Hi there, and thank you for watching another one of my videos. This one is going to be about changing the rear brake line on a Gixxer to a braided line. The first thing we're going to do is remove the bolt that holds the reservoir onto the frame. This will allow us to get the reservoir out so we can drain it. So once we get access to the reservoir, we're going to take a number 2 Phillips screwdriver and we are going to remove the cap from the reservoir. This brake fluid is awfully dark, and the cap was stuck on pretty well. But what's really interesting is how the expansion, little rubber expansion piece was all warped and messed up. And that's pretty much from just sitting in old brake fluid for a long period of time. The bike's 11 years old. If the brake fluid had been changed regularly, that little rubber piece wouldn't be so bad. But brake fluid should not be that color of brown. So now I take a screwdriver with some paper towels, and I'm just trying to get all the funk out of the bottom of this reservoir. Alright, next I take the little cap off of the bleeder valve down at the bottom on the rear caliper. We break that free, and then I'm going to hook my mighty vac up to that bleeder valve and bust it open, and I'm going to pull all the fluid out of the system. This will almost get all of that brown nasty stuff out of the system. Better in my mighty vac than on the garage floor. So with the fluid out of the system, now I'm going to remove the 8mm screw which holds the line onto the swing arm. And then there's a 12mm or 14mm banjo bolt that's going to hold that brake line onto the master cylinder, the rear master cylinder. So once we get that broke free, we can go ahead and take that banjo bolt completely out. But we do want to leave the line up in the air, because we don't want any chance of that crap draining and getting on anything. Now we're down below. We're going to break free the banjo bolt on the caliper. And don't worry about protecting these banjo bolts. When you buy a new brake line kit, the brake line kit is going to come with new banjo bolts. Usually they're color matched, and they'll come with 4 crush washers, and your crush washers just go on each side of the banjo bolt, with the new brake line in between. So there's your crush washer on the banjo bolt, and then here's your brake line. And you stick your banjo bolt through the brake line, and then take a crush washer and put it on the threads, the open threads of the banjo bolt before you turn it into the master. So with this step, and it doesn't matter if you're doing front or rear, just get your banjo bolt snug. Put it on, get it snug, don't tighten anything down yet. Again with the bottom, line everything up, get your new banjo bolt, put your crush washer on, slide it through the banjo bolt, slide it through the new brake line, which that end is called a banjo, and put your new crush washer on, and then just put it on. Do not try to install this banjo bolt with a wrench. If you can't get it to thread just using your fingers, there's something wrong. So back up and pay attention to what you've done. Don't force these bolts into the caliper or into the master. So remember, everything is still loose. So we're going to put this brake line retainer, we're going to mount that back to the swing arm. And why we want to leave everything loose is we want everything to fit before we start tightening everything down. It just makes it a lot easier to manage. So once we have our brake line in place and everything fits the way it should, then we're going to tighten down our banjo bolt. It doesn't matter if you start at the caliper or if you start at the master, just tighten it down. We've got the line in the exact place where we want it to be. So we've got all our lines in place. We've got our banjo bolts tightened down. So now let's fill up the reservoir with new .4, and we want to use .4 from a brand new sealed container. You don't want to use an open container because we don't know how long that open container has been sitting on a shelf, and brake fluid does attract moisture. So let's put our Mighty Vac onto the bleeder valve and get some pressure on the Mighty Vac, and then just break it open. And what I like to do is drain the reservoir until the reservoir is almost empty. Don't go to where it's empty because then you're going to suck air back into the system. So once it's about empty, tighten back your bleeder valve and fill it back up. And then we want to run another reservoir full of fluid through the system. This guarantees that you've gotten all the air out of the system, and new fluid is in everything. You have the newest fluid in your caliper and your line, and the brakes are ready to go. Sorry about that. When I'm working, there's often people that come by the house and they bother me, and I don't get a lot of work done because people want to talk about their lifestyle. But I definitely get to screw with a lot of people when they come by. Anyway, so with this little dead air, you saw me pump the brakes. You definitely want to pump the brake and make sure that you have some kind of feel in your brake lever. If it falls all the way to the ground, there's something wrong. You need to continue to bleed until you have a good grip in your caliper when you pump the brake lever. So this is my final pump where I'm going to pull the last time of pulling fluid through the system. Like I said, I always like to do it twice because it almost guarantees that you're not going to have any air in the system if you do it twice. If you do run into issues, there's no reason why you can't put new fluid in your Mighty Vac and pump it up from the caliper to the reservoir. Just make sure that you empty the reservoir first. Your Mighty Vac does a good job of pumping as well as pulling. It's also very important to get that rubber cap back over the top of that bleeder valve so dirt and debris doesn't get in there. But when you're done, that's what you want your brakes to look like. You spin the wheel, you hit the brake, it stops immediately. Now, of course, always make sure to top off your brake fluid reservoir. So we put on the little plastic expansion, the little rubber expansion piece, and then we put our cap back on. We put our screws in. We're going to tighten the screws down. You're just going to snug up these screws. You don't have to be a gorilla and get these screws as tight as you can possibly turn them. You know, the next guy that works on this bike is going to want to be able to get these screws out. So just make them snug. That rubber piece will do its job and keep the air and moisture out and keep the fluid in. So wipe everything down. You don't want that dot forward dripping down on any painted pieces after you're finished up. Go back, check all your screws and make sure everything's tight. And then come on, Mike, let's get the screw into that reservoir and get it into place. So we got the screw, got our reservoir mounted back into place. So this GSXR rear brake line install is now done. It took me probably less than an hour start to finish to do this job. I hope you try it yourself. There's nothing better than braided lines on a motorcycle.